and welcome to the Data Strategy Gurus podcast. Today we have the VP of Technology, Matthieu Jonglez, former MarkLogic, but now integrated with the Progress Data platform. Matthieu, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Yves. Thank you.
Matthieu, you had a very impressive career in data and technology. Can you tell us a bit more what initially spiked you in data management and what keeps you motivated in this ever-evolving field?
I'm blushing a bit now. Thank you for the compliment. And yeah, we've got a similar sort of background, so I'll have to return a compliment as well.
Thank you.
Some of my early projects were actually squarely in the structured data world, so e-commerce and quoting platforms, but always with a industry and practical focus. My first real foray in data management, as we think about it today, was actually in 1999 when I was the co-founder of a startup looking at data management and data exchange in the manufacturing supply chain. So ever since, I've looked at data from how do we employ data? How do we leverage data? How do we operationalize data to do things differently? So, and I've explored all aspects of it. Search engine, taxonomy and ontology management, classification, metadata management, knowledge graph. So actually you asked, what is my motivation? What is my vision? It's to help you understand and act on the data you have.
Yeah, I understand that you're not into the data space because you came from the technical background data, but more from the business side. So you feel if you have that data, those insights, how they can help the logistics supply chain where you came from. That's your different take, what you have on the data management approach?
I suppose. I mean, it's about the practicality of it, right? I mean, I've moved throughout the years, from research, and actually started back in the days of BT Labs in a research department. So, I've seen both sides, and we actually still have both sides in our teams because keeping abreast with latest technology, etc., is really important. But I think democratizing those technology and making it useful is really critical as well. Sometimes, when I discuss with prospects or customers or partners, and to look at the data science element, which is really interesting and fascinating. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love it as well. But I always need to have that vision of how it's going to make a difference for someone and how we can drive it to actually simplicity as well. And I know we're probably going to explore Gen AI and those sort of things later on in our little discussion here. But yeah, often in those conversations, we go hyper technical really quickly and we forget that often actually we're here to solve a business problem. And a business problem is led by a business analyst or by a SME, by someone who runs their operation and is not a data specialist, not an IT specialist. I mean, they want to be able to use data for their process, but they're coming at it from a process perspective.
Yeah, it's nice that you already touched upon Gen AI and artificial intelligence, the large language models and the semantics. What is your feeling on the current state of data management with this evolution with AI and supporting data management, supporting decision-driven organizations? And what are the biggest challenges organizations are facing these days?
We're at a very interesting juncture in time. We've got two forces. I mean, one is economics, and we clearly have seen a fairly drastic change in the economy around us in the last few years. And when once upon a time, if you want to make more revenue, you were going out and selling more. Selling more is actually much harder now. So people are trying to make the most of what they have. And what does that entail? What does that entail? Analyzing your data, understanding your market, understanding your own behavior, optimizing better customer intimacy. So a lot of those things are actually data-driven, very, very data-driven. So moving from let's go out and sell to let's analyze our data and operationalize it and make decisions based on our data. So that's a very interesting inflection point on how organizations are thinking about the data. The second inflection point clearly is technology. We've already mentioned generative AI twice in 5 minutes. No doubt it will come up again. But the it has an associated impact on how do we prepare data, how do we leverage data and bring data in that space. So what are the challenges here? Well, we've got a big need to change culture around data. And that goes from really building our data stewards and empowering them, to identifying and giving the right tools to our data citizens, to thinking about architectures differently.
Yeah, that's a lot what is going on. I think you made a smart remark on where back in the days when you wanted to make more revenue, you had to sell more. Does that mean now with technology and data and the insights, we are capable of leveraging those margins and improving that? So we're really into the business process optimization part, thanks to the technology and the data, if I understand what you're saying?
So that's definitely one aspect. Optimizing processes, interactions, supply chain, etc. All of that can be driven by data. I think there are other dimensions as well. Micro-targeting of your customers. When you understand your customer need, when you understand your customer interactions, you can provide the right product, the right service at the right time without going for a full blast to everyone. If there are also optimization or productivity enhancement by bringing the right data to the right person at the right time. If you think about a lot of knowledge graph, a lot of data fabric work that we're doing, those types of projects are typically about making sure that within a business process, you've got all the data you need to make the decision at the point you need to make it, instead of having to reach out to different team members, maybe create an internal support request for someone to go and look back at a contract or find the right data in a data silo somewhere. So there's a lot of optimization there, which is not necessarily cost cutting or anything. It's about enabling people to do their job better.
Yeah, it's cutting down those silos, and the technology helps us a better, combining those organizations where before you really had to put out that request and then unify it in your own way. MarkLogic, the company you came from, which has now been acquired by Progress, is a leader in unifying that data and integrating that data. Can you explain the unique approach that MarkLogic took on integrating that data, and what are the advantages now of being embedded in the Progress data platform ecosystem?
Sure. I mean, as you just mentioned, MarkLogic and the Progress data platform now, that we're building around it, our objective here is to really unlock the value from complex data, to make it easily discoverable, fit for purpose, to build high value, high power applications. Nowadays, to deliver decision intelligence and support your AI journey, of course. What do we do behind the scene? I mean, we integrate data wherever it is coming from. So breaking down those data silos, we're actually storing the part of the data we care about. So usually metadata, knowledge graph associated with those things, etc. We provide querying and retrieval capability on top of that. We have really powerful way to curate, govern, and secure data. And because storing data, managing data, enriching data is one thing, but using it is another. I mean, we are building and have built over the years really good capabilities around exploring and analyzing that data. So, what are the pivots, the pillars of our technology? I mean, first of all, a truly multimodal database. We can manage documents, graph, relational, geospatial, semantic, bitemporal data in a single engine. We have really high performance search and query capability, so we can run complex queries across all of your data and get really accurate and sub-second results. We have powerful data integration and data management capability. So integrating data, that's the data direct part of the portfolio, which is part of the platform. Really impressive way of curating data and adding semantics and metadata management with Semaphore, Agile modeling, etc. So we have smart mastering in MarkLogic as well as part of the data hub and Data Hub Central product. So really powerful metadata and data management capability overall, complemented by a comprehensive suite of tools for developers and business users. Why? Because we want developers to build applications faster, to reduce the time to market. And why business users? Because as I mentioned already several times, we want to put our tools, our capabilities in the hands of the people that run the business with their data. It's really important that a data project doesn't go at the pace of an IT project. We can power IT for everything to do with the integration, running the platform, but we need the data to be in the hands of the business users to move at the pace of the business.
Are you referring that there is a difference between IT and the business part? I mean, never heard about that, but no, I'm just laughing. But I do understand what you mean. So you provide as well with the Progress platform a way of businesses to easily create their data products and make data more accessible. Then you put it through IT. I mean, IT has its value by governing it, by providing the architecture, making sure it runs 24/7, it's stable. I mean, that needs to be done. Sometimes if you see it comes from the business, it's not so solid as it should be. It's not so secure as it should be. So that's the part where I see IT still needs to be knocking on the door and say, hey guys, we need to slow down. Slowing down, not because of we do things so slow, but we need to do these things to make solid solutions in such a way.
Absolutely. I mean, the infrastructure part, all the plumbing, the connections, the integration, all of those things, those have to be governed, go through a normal IT lifecycle, etc. Where many data projects break down today is when the data and the data interpretation is actually treated as a project lifecycle artifact. Data moves at a much faster pace. Its interpretation is different. We're bringing data agility. In the same way that engineering teams have been moving to an agile model, so you can deliver incremental functionality, shippable incremental functionality at the end of each sprint, and you're supported by a shared IT organization that makes sure the infrastructure on which you run is secure, governed, etc. We want to do the same thing with data, right? Build data agility. Instead of engineering Scrum team, you've got business Scrum team. Thinking about a data product, thinking about how they need to interpret the data, use the data in their operation, supported by an IT organization which provide them with the software and the infrastructure to operate in.
Does that mean that the data platform from Progress and all the toolings around that now provide the two different modi where you can have the exploration part, which goes pretty fast on the speed of data, and that you can, once you have that data product developed or that vision for the data or the decision you want to take with your data, and then move it through the slower path from IT, be fully governed, fully secure, and you can easily switch between the two of those?
I'd go even further than that, because we completely separate the infrastructure part, the software which is governed, etc., and goes through the IT lifecycle as normal, from the data part, which is using a more information science, data science librarian type workflow. So without changing the software configuration, you can change the modeling in an ontology and try a new data scenario, try a new data interpretation in a matter of hours, in a matter of minutes, in fact. And not only that, but from a technology perspective, because it is all semantics and W3C standard compliant, you can actually have several of those interpretations running side by side. And even at query time, you can say, oh, I want to run through the lens of this world or that business domain or that process. So there's no hard-coded schemas. There's no hard-coded view of the world. There's no predefined data reduction. And I think data reduction, loss of precision, is actually something that we talk a lot about in our project, because earlier in the cycle, you do data interpretation. Typically, the more information you lose.
Yeah, it's data agility, and when you say we can look through the different lenses, I'm the traditional schooled data warehouse builder, dimensional modeling data guy. and had the discussion of one version of the truth, where Bill Inman, one of my former guests as well, was very proud of providing that. But we've learned over time that there are different versions of the truth depending on which department or where you are in your environment. And that's important, that you can easily switch those views, but still on the same basis, the same foundation.
Exactly. Because based on who you are, where you are, you might have very different information needs, even though your query is the same. It might be based on access, it might be based on local translations, it might be based on regulations, all sorts of things. I mean, we do a lot of projects in the pharmaceutical space. Well, even if the research data is the same, even if the molecule is supposedly the same, it might not be manufactured in the same way, because the recipe might change depending on the local ingredients. The brand might also be different depending on the market. But the reporting requirements may be different. The little leaflet you get in the box may be different, because that's based on local regulations. It doesn't mean the product is different. I mean, conceptually, it's treating the same thing. People might not have the same symptom, because symptoms are also something which varies depending on where in the world you live. So it's interesting. I mean, we could go on for hours on that, but if you go back all the way to the root of ontologies and semiotic, not semantic, but semiotic, the relationship between the words we use, the objects in the real world, and the concept behind them, that mapping varies drastically depending on audience.
Yeah, fully understand what you're talking about. Now, with generative AI and the large language models coming in, and we're talking about different perspectives. I mean, people have used ChatGPT already for the last year, and where you see, well, there it's pretty clear that you can add a different role, and depending on the role you give it to the large language model, you get a different outcome. But telling you the same thing, but depending on the role you give it, you get a different wording. That's exactly what you're referring to, I think. And how do you see these large language models will help revolutionizing the space of data management? Will that help us in building better solutions, more valuable solutions?
I mean, it is profoundly changing the field of data management. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, from a technical perspective, because it gives you new tools and new approaches, new ways of interpreting a corpus, new way of serving a corpus. From my perspective, it's also really interesting because it is driving a very different type of adoption for metadata and data management. I mean, a lot of customers, a lot of prospects are coming to us saying, hey, we've started this generative AI project, but it's not really performing the way we want. Why? Well, what have you given it as an input for rank strategy, etc.? It's like, well, the data we have. Well, guess where the problem lies, right? So, from an adoption perspective, generative AI is really interesting because it is fueling the need for better data. Our customers, our prospects, our partners are all telling us of horror story where customers have tried to use their data as is to drive a generative AI solution. Same old, same old. I'm not going to say garbage in, garbage out, because actually the generative AI solutions are making a good job at hiding some of that. But the reality is, if you want precise and accurate and trustworthy answers on private data, today you need a RAG strategy. Today you need the right level of security, the right level of understanding, the right level of search. And that goes all the way back to our story of breaking the data silos. Moving from a application-centric architecture to data-centric architecture, having knowledge graphs, having a data fabric from which you can actually surface the right data at the right time. And the conversation we just had about micro-targeting our users, about understanding our users' behavior, I mean, all of that goes right back in the way we search our fabric to include the right fragment in the RAG to support the generative AI response generation. So from that adoption perspective, we're seeing a renewed interest in data management and in metadata management and search technologies in general. The associated with that, I suppose, there's a more social or societal perspective, which is data is becoming cool again. you hear of people trying things with ChatGPT, trying their own AI, ML pipelines and ML ops, and it's great actually. I mean, socially, I'm now answering questions about stuff we do in our research labs, and it's actually really interesting. People didn't pay attention 10 years ago. However, you were asking about impact and changes. One big impact and change we're seeing actually in the way we interact on a lot of data projects is a realization of the legal and threats associated with how data is used. So DLP, privacy, all of those things are fueling actually a lot of additional inquiries, a lot of additional time spent on projects designing what should have been catered for all along. But certainly organizations are now understanding that their data, the minute it's out in the LLM, may or may not belong to them, and they may or may not be in control, and there are unknowns. So we're seeing a lot of activity in with security teams, with legal teams, with procurement teams around how do you handle this new landscape.
So what you're seeing here is that previously we had to pay attention to the governance and the security of the data, but because it was more siloed, it went lesser out, let's call it like that. People were not paying so much attention to it. I recall the days where you said, okay, I need access to the server, to the database. Here are the admin rights, full open, whatever you do with it. You could do as a developer kind of everything on the server, but you're very well aware of the security breaches, of the privacy regulations and all of that, what you need to take into account and be careful with, because you see so much valuable information, which shouldn't be for all eyes, but there is a kind of trust towards developers to develop that product. But now with the large language models, this information is easier to go out of the organization. So people become more aware of governing that, of protecting the privacy of all the information which goes into the model. And that's where they now become more aware and paying more attention to that part of data management.
Absolutely. So until relatively recently, the majority of security work associated with project was doing role-based control, compartment security, etc., within the database, making sure that the data in the system or in the fabric, in the search interfaces, were reaching the right person. Now we're seeing a lot of organization go beyond that and either contractually or through systems, making sure that once that data is served in the application, there's actually traceability beyond that. If it's sent out to a customer, if it's actually shared with another coworker, all of those sort of things, and especially restrictions around using that data in training LLMs, in AI or machine learning projects, etc. So there's definitely a recognition now that using data for the purpose of training has risks. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means that we should understand the full scope and accept the risk when we want to accept the risk.
So it's a different approach. I feel like when you say we want to, you have two modi again in developing solutions. If you want to be innovative, creative, you have to, you're building less secure and governance solutions because you want to go fast, and that is slowing you down. And on the other hand, if you want to have it protected, that takes ages before you have the regulations in place and so on. So that's a bit what I see, where you have to find a trade-off. Do we use that data to take the risk to go faster, to build really an innovative product as such? Or do we really put the foot on the brake and within the next 100 years, maybe we have the next large language model, and not at the speed where you see every week you have a new version of an open source large language model. Technology goes at such a fast pace. I mean, I've been diving into large language models now in depth for the last 6 months. And if you take frameworks like LangChain, it changes every week. Documentation changes, the complete framework changes after months, and you it's hard to stay on top of it, on the development and on everything what is on the market to build those solutions. And I think that's going to be a challenge now for most of the people to understand, one, on what is possible with the technology, but as well on capturing that in that capability and using that to build the innovative products. So, talking about that, how do you see the data management space evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, and what emerging trends should data professionals and executives should be paying attention to?
Well, data quality, of course, is a big one for me. Data management, right? Metadata management as well. So 5 to 10 years, I mean, you've seen the pace of change right now. I mean, in some of those topics, it's hard to predict what's going to come in 2 weeks. So this said, and back to what we said a few minutes ago, there's this very big dichotomy, difference in swimlane, in pace between our industry and manufacturing and etc. users, regardless of the industry they're in, and our research. So if you look at projects in production or projects that are dealing with data at scale, I think we're still in the early days of data fabric and knowledge graph and all of those things. So there's still a lot of technology to be developed, a lot of processes to be simplified to make it applicable and make sure it's rolled out and successful in those environments. I mean, we're still seeing the same three big hurdles, for our customers, which is the plumbing, the data quality, and actually operationalizing your data. So, that's the order in which, as an organization, you need to jump, and the order in which you're falling as well. And just something like plumbing, I mean, you just said it a minute ago. LLMs, new models coming out on a weekly basis, right? The modern data stack is fantastic. It's great. It's composable. But for many, it is too composable and they don't know where to go anymore. And that results in projects which are, it's fantastic for research projects, for production projects. What framework do I use? What technology? What API? I mean, it's changing on a weekly basis, on a daily basis in some cases. Hold on, I've just come in this morning. My API, my call doesn't work anymore. What's going on? So, one thing that we're really working on in the Progress Data Platform is making sure we've got an end-to-end story. So you don't have to reinvent that plumbing. And if you think about the strengths of Semaphore, the strengths of MarkLogic, the strengths of Data Direct, the strengths of Corticon, the strengths of Kendo, another Progress product that we're using for visualization, we have all of the elements to really make high power, high value applications. And the data platform strategy is essentially creating the blueprint. So as a customer, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can follow a proven recipe. So your data projects can be integrating with the data sources all the way to delivering value in a business application. As soon as possible, as fast as possible, minimum time to market, minimum complexity, minimum investment in the commodity, in the plumbing. Because where the value lies from a business perspective is in the data quality. Because you understand your data, you are producing that data for a reason. So what is that reason? Can you model it? Can you actually identify it in content? And how can you leverage it to change the way you do business? And very often, projects are completely submerged in the quagmire of choosing the right moving API, and the right component for the day. Then they completely lose track of the rest of the data journey. Now, of course, I imagine there'll be some stabilization, some consolidation, and we're already starting to see that consolidation. But we need to provide, I think, as an industry, actually, some guidance on how to compose the right architecture to achieve the right data quality, so you can operationalize your data. All the while maintaining security and helping you enforce governance. At the end of the day, without governance, you won't have trustworthy data. Without security, you have all sorts of breaches, reputational issue, and you'll be caught up in the crossfire of solving data security breaches rather than solving your business problems, right? So back to square one.
So we have a lot of more possibilities because we have so much choice of technology, but it made it only more complex. So that's my takeaway from what you just said. But as a vendor, you're helping customers as well with the blueprints where you say, this is what we've tried. We've put a lot of research in it. We know this solution works. Maybe you have so many other different vector databases. What is possible? We know for this type of problem, this is the best to use. This is the plumbing you can use. This is the visualization. And this is how you can build your product. If we see you have a different need, we can revisit and give you a different blueprint and then migrate from the previous one to this newer one with your new requirements, if I understand.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll probably jump on, you just said, this is the best one, this is the best one, this is the best one. Well, actually, you don't necessarily need the best one. Sometimes the best one's actually too complicated, too expensive, too whatever, too hard to manage. It's the right one for the use case. For example, we may not have the best vector database ever in MarkLogic, but because we vector as well as all of the other data types that we support, all the other query types that we support, all of the other indexing strategies that we support, it's actually the best for the use case because it allows you not only to operationalize your data, do your analytics, but also serve your data through RAG for Gen AI solutions. So it's about how do we optimize the architecture and the product capabilities and make the right choices on the way to deliver an enterprise solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of flashback. I mean, I've just built a large language model solution as well, and I had so many choices, like you said, the vector databases, the transformers, the embeddings, all of that part. And because it was very new, I thought, okay, with what I read, I go for just a SQLite database, which is easy accessible. You can look at your data, you can see the metadata, how it works.
Come on, if you didn't use MarkLogic?
It's too expensive. No, I mean,
Shocking.
I think it's a good use case, definitely, to look at MarkLogic with the semantics and put that in place. But you're absolutely right where I said, okay, this is what I feel is the best one. And I know depending on, once I have the full solution built, I can revisit all the individual components and I know where we can optimize if the outcome is not what I'm expecting. But first I need to build the solution with the individual components and then evaluate that part. So looking at that on a more personal note, what values guide you in your personal journey and how do these influence your vision for the future for data and analytics?
Well, I think I opened with that already. It's making data and the knowledge within that data accessible so you can act in informed ways. I mean, we could call that democratizing data management. It's leveraging your data. That's what I've actually tried to achieve and what I've actually worked on in pretty much every single one of my roles since for the last 25 years, essentially. And how does that influence my vision of the future? Well, clearly one-sided and very focused on the data management and analytics, but it's about use case. It's about identifying high-value use cases, identifying where data can help. Because if you look at the way we operate today, 80% of data is unstructured. The vast majority of data that organizations are producing, exchanging, is not used for decision making. The 20% that lives in the relational world, that's what we put on BI dashboards. That's what our management teams are looking at on their weekly stats and scorecards. It's such a small fragment of the overall data landscape we've got to actually make decisions. So changing that status quo is really the motivator here. How can we bring the full context at the point of decision? And the full context comes from understanding the full scope of the data and interpreting it in the right way. So, going back to semantics, that allows you to understand the context of the data from the point of origin. Why was it created in that way? And some of it is technical, absolutely, and that's why we've got all the product suite that we have to help you in that data journey. But a lot of it is also data science. A lot of it is also library science. I mean, good old traditional looking at data, talking to the data producers, understanding what they mean, what they've tried to do, why they did it. And sometimes, even today, you've got sometimes absolutely fantastic answers.
It's a critical mindset. It's that challenging and just what you see, not always believing. I see that as well with we have that with the ChatGPTs. You put a question forward, you get an answer, but you always need to challenge that answer. Is it really right? And you need to be sure that it is factual correct in such a way. So that demands a critical mindset of how you look at your data and how you take that information. It's like the journalists back in the days, they were forced to just double, triple verify all the information they got. But now with the speed or at which they need to work, it's getting upended. Sometimes they get a fact and they think it's true and give that out and then don't do the double fact checking. Now, thinking about that, what advice would you give to newcomers that are entering into the data and analytics space and make that really their business, their roadmap to be successful?
Be curious. Curiosity is actually the number one skill here. Because we often talk about data mining, as one of the starting points of creating your data journey, because you need to understand what you have and what it means and all those things. You need to be curious about how data came to be. Why was it produced? Why was it produced the way it is? What was meant by the author? What is needed by the audience? Some of it is business acumen. Some of it is technical. Some of it is. The bottom line is, if I look at all of my teams, the successful teams are those that are not losing the curiosity over time. Keep trying to discover. It's ultimately data management is detective work, and you need to be on your feet, looking, scrutinizing all the time. Everyone could be a data citizen. Everyone is a data citizen. Some people might not know it yet. It's only a matter of time.
But do organizations need to provide a bit more time for people to allow that exploration? Like you say, be curious, which is very general, but then you add it onto it. It can be technical, it can be business, it can be data related. So it's not only in the domain where you are or are the specialist, but be more holistic in being curious across the business where you're working in such a way.
Absolutely. And some of the more, I was going to say interesting, some of the more successful projects that we've seen were completely organized in ways that are non-traditional. We had a really interesting project which started as a almost one-man show from a doctor in a line of business that was actually a bit puzzled by some of the data that he was observing, and he started building models, doing things in R and doing all sorts of things. And we met him in one of the interview at that client. The client didn't even know that they had such a doctor in the organization that was looking at data. We had some fantastic conversation, and he became one of the data stewards for one of the big projects. Brought his experience of the field, brought his experience of what things mean in the context and how you combine what the data says with the clinical science, with your interpretation of how you interact with the patient, to actually do essentially data science, but with the human in the loop and an understanding of the human side of it. And I think that's what I mean by curiosity. You always keep all of the variables, all of the dimensions of the project in mind when you're designing solutions, when you're thinking about the results, when you're thinking about the algorithms. I mean, if you go at it from a purely technical angle, you might get something interesting, but is it true? Is it relevant? Is it going to make a difference?
Yeah, stay interested, stay motivated, and stay energized, and you will find your answers of what you're looking for. Matthieu, we're coming to the end of the show. I always close up with data is connecting us all, but music is connecting us all as well. So I would love to hear what is your favorite band or favorite type of music?
It's a very hard question because I've got quite an eclectic taste. So I'll give you a few elements of answer. So I'm actually a saxophone player. I don't play a lot. Whenever I got time, I try to do a little bit still. Right now, I've got a couple of scores on my on my stand. One from Paolo Conte and one from Astor Piazzolla. So Cafe 1930. Really interesting. Love them. This said, on the other end of the scale, tonight is actually the Brive Festival, and we're going with the family to watch Sting. So there you go.
Oh, he's still performing, so that's interesting to hear. Yeah. That's quite a very variation in taste of music, but I really discovered a lot of music with my guests, which I've never heard before. So this is the fun part for me to close up. Matthieu, it was so much fun having you and interesting on the Data Gurus Strategy podcast. So thank you for coming and having this very nice chat.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.